Hello, Professor. This video is covering the different religions that were established in ancient Africa, and it will go over the different ones, their time periods, important things that happened during those times. And this information comes from chapter 15 in our book and also from an article that I found on Judaism, as the book didn't really go into too much detail about that. So I will be breaking down that timeline and utilizing my notes to work through this video. Um, Monotheistic is the worshiping of one god, where before this, a lot of the cultures were worshiping multiple gods, and this was kind of a turn where a new type of view was put into place. And we'll start with Judaism, which is one of the oldest religions, and its traceability, while is difficult, tends to go back to first mentioning of like Abraham. There was also Isaac and Jacob. So these were, around the 1900 BCE that these people were around and where it took place and where this was spreading. It's challenging to find a lot of this information as it is so ancient that a lot of it wasn't recorded or was recorded by in later centuries by others who were depicting stories that were passed down, as we know. So it was kind of challenging to talk on that. So one of the unique things about the Judaism was that in Egypt, the Pharaoh Akhenaten started to be the one who was promoting in that area the worshiping of one god versus many gods, which again, as I had mentioned, was something that was sought after prior to these establishments. And so but it is challenging to get any solid information on this, but that does seem to be the overall understanding of this. And the next thing to discuss would be Christianity, which is going to be a pretty big block of this, in addition to the religion of Islam. So with Christianity, it spread through all of Africa, and mostly focusing on North Africa, and it was spread through the trade routes, word of mouth, different communities. As these communities connected to each other, the Christianity spread, which was around the first century that it started really establishing in this area. And Alexandria in Egypt was one of the first areas that it was established. And something really cool about this is my grandfather was born in Alexandria, Egypt, and I am Orthodox Greek descendant. And I just found it really cool to be able to connect that my roots actually come from Alexandria, where we are speaking about with this. So I just think it's really cool. But it does mention about Saint Mark traveling to Alexandria and kind of helping establish this religion there. The difficulty was that during this time, the Roman Empire was also there. And the Roman Empire did not play nice. As we all know from history, they were a very stern group of organization, group, kingdom, whatever you would like to call it, empire, as a lot of them are called. But they didn't play well with others, and if you thought differently, they were not about that. So, without going into expanded, anybody who didn't believe with them, believe what they believed, were persecuted. And so what that led to was a lot of the Christian believers to flee the area in fear of persecution, and they ended up going into the western deserts of Africa, away from all their comforts, in order to protect themselves. And while out there, there's a person mentioned, Anthony of Desert. What a cool name. And Anthony of Desert started to, as they did back then, have communications and create discussions with groups and begin to establish and spread Christianity again as an organized religion and as a ways of worship, and had a very big impact in doing so. And there's also a mentioning of, I'm trying to, Phrodimus, who was able to help a king of Aksum to convert to Christianity. And I think as they were able to get some of these leaders to convert to Christianity, it seriously encouraged the promotion of this religion, and was able to help with spreading of the religion. So I think it had a big impact. And there is also a Bishop of Selma that really helped spread this, and actually founded some of the first Christian monasteries in Ethiopia. And Ethiopia itself is very unique because, as I was reading in one of my articles and stuff, they mentioned this thing about black Jews, and it's like, you know, a lot of this took place in Mediterranean areas where darker pigment was natural for the area. So it's kind of confusing to hear him say it that way as a modern person, but I understand where it's coming from back then, because of just how spread apart, and how everything wasn't intertwined and interconnected. But this continued to spread through the next couple of centuries, and so that's how Christianity was able to keep spreading. The next important thing is Islam. As we know, Islam has spread to a lot of areas, and that includes spreading across North Africa, and it continued to spread with the help of the trade network that was happening during those times. This happened around the 7th century, and this is actually mentioned in the book under that section of the expansion of Islam in Africa. And so that's where all of this takes place. And so I would say the biggest details to add to this is what Islam brought to the thing. And so just like the other religions, what it focused on was one God and the worshiping of that one God, and the acceptance that it's okay for coexistence of religions. And I think between Christianity and Islam, they both speak of that. The spreading was more, we're already at the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, 4th, 5th. So then around the 6th and 7th century is kind of where a lot of this notation was taking place, of this spreading. And the military, as they were taking over places, also helped with this. So why was the Trans-Saharan important for this? Is exactly as it sounds. It was such a large area of trade networks that it was able to spread these religions further and further. Different types of traders were able to influence people in towns and towns, along these routes, to adapt their religion. And as that happened, more and more took on place. And just like persecution of Romans, not everybody was like, oh, okay, yeah, Islam, cool. So I think, as I read in there, it was kind of more of like an accepted because of commercialism, but economic reasons, that it was like, oh, okay, well, I might not believe what you believe, but we're cool because we both want to trade and make money, and or trade our goods and stuff like that. So mosques have always been a very important part of Islam, and they are all over the place. And this is because that religion is practiced several times throughout the day. And so, what a dedicated Islamic people will stop everything in order to worship several times throughout the day, and that still goes on to this day. Mansa Musa was actually he converted to Islamic, and as I had mentioned in another paper, he had traveled on a pilgrimage to around the 1300s, if I remember correctly, to Egypt. And while he was there flaunting his wealth and everything, as we had talked about, he was also spreading Islamic religion to those areas. Some of the other things that became established in that area of that network were also, as we had mentioned in a discussion this week, was about Timbuktu and Geo as being areas that were also impacted by the trade network, but also by these religious beliefs. And this blending allowed, again, for multiple religions to take place and be accepted. Africanization of Islam, it's based off of the fact that it's a blending. It's a blending of culture, traditions, religion, all of this thing. So it's kind of like making it your own. So you would say the people then were making it their own. And so that is where Africanization kind of comes into play with this. Kind of like a little brain cloud there. I'm just trying to continue my thoughts. With all of this, a lot of conflicts took place. There were a lot of not necessarily good outcomes. Almohads during the 12th century had a kind of they were not highly looked after because they had become kind of too religious, if you would say, if I remember reading correctly, and they were kind of like they were kind of looked on as being kind of difficult during those times. Conflicts, unfortunately, are still happening to this day, but I think the spreading of these religions helped shape the culture of Africa, and to kind of reincorporate this entire thing. Religions have a very valuable place in life, and I feel like they help create structure, boundaries, and just help with a guidance of life. And if that's what helps you out, then I think that's perfect. While it wasn't the only influences back then, we can see that it was a very major influence. I really appreciate you taking time to watch my video. I definitely had some struggles in trying to put this information together, but I hope I came across as clear and concise as I possibly could. Thank you, and have a nice day.